2 seconds. And handshake, lights, camera, action. Wesley, what are you going to open with? He opens with the king's pawn. And oh my goodness me, what do I see on the board? It's my favorite opening, the Caro-Kann.
Richard already blundering there, the Caro. No, I'm only joking. A very good opening that Ivanka is a specialist in.
And now this is a nice trendy idea. Ooh, and Richard now going for one of the most combative approaches here. I personally like to attack the queen, and well, Richard now doing it. And this is very, very trendy because pieces are hanging everywhere on the board. And not only that, but the play gets wilder. This will suit Richard because the two have very differing styles. Wesley has a very classical positional approach, whereas Richard, he likes to mix things up. He likes the dynamism.
He does. Richard really likes mess. He likes chaos. He's a chaos fire starter on the board, and Wesley can deal with the chaos. He's a brilliant player all round, but prefers to keep control of the position. So you can see the heart rates both in the red there. They're both quite high, and I think Richard has prepared something quite nice here. He's got a messy, chaotic position, and he needs to get that against the solid Wesley So. And he is a pawn up as well, but Wesley just simply developing a piece there, and it's, I guess, going to come down to whose king is safest. It looks to me like White might be able to get his king safe soon. Can Richard get his king to safety?
Yeah, that is going to be a pressing issue, especially if Wesley decides to go all gung-ho and castle that king to the left side of the board. And you can actually track the advantage of the players by looking at the dashboard background there, all the way on the right. And if one color dominates, that means that that side is winning.
At the moment, it's fairly even there. Wesley just putting his king out of any trouble on the open line. He's getting ready to move his rook to check Richard's king. That's where rooks belong, on open lines, particularly going towards their opponent's king. Richard simply develops his bishop, and his king is going to try to, we call it castling by hand, move right one square and then tuck itself on the fianchetto position there. But at the moment, sensible developing move. And the question for Wesley is really, you are a pawn down, Wesley. Where is your compensation? If you don't play energetically here, you're simply going to be a pawn down. And that's not a good sign. And I love what Rich has done in the opening, Ivanka, to put the pressure on Wesley with the black pieces.
And I agree with you completely. And the bar is also in complete agreement there. I love what Richard is doing. He did not castle, because then that rook there in the corner on the open line will get extra power. Instead, he castles by hand. The king will find a safe hiding place there on the G7 square in front of his own pawns. And then he just can simply introduce the queen into the game. I'm really loving this position for Richard. And you know what's also I'm loving? I'm loving the fact that Richard has a massive lead on the clock.
Yeah, and Wesley attacking that knight with his rook, but this has not gone well for Wesley. How many times do we see Wesley surprised when he has the white pieces? Well, Richard has done his homework here. You need to go into battle with a plan in place, otherwise you're going to be shooting blindly. And Richard has done precisely that. He's got a great position. I think he can defend his knight by using his h-pawn. Maybe he's just calculating a sacrifice there. He's got to make sure his king doesn't get too exposed if he does that, but he should be okay here by using the h-pawn to defend the knight, and he has done that. He has defended it, and here we go. Wesley has come in with a major sacrifice there.
But okay, well, Richard had calmly calculated everything, and he has a response. He moved his rook forward to attack the queen, and that might not have been the most accurate form of defense. So now the king is in check. What is Richard gonna do? Is he gonna block that check with the queen? Maybe with the, probably with the rook? No, he retreats the knight. And well, Wesley is out of his comfort zone, that is for sure. But one thing about Wesley, you should never provoke the bear, because when it's prodded, well, he will awaken with a tremendous roar.
And Wesley is now a bear. I like it. Wesley the bear, and he is a ferocious player on the board. And what I like about Wesley's play here is he realized he had a bad position, and he realized he needed to do something very sharp, very dramatic, very out of the book, and he did that. His timing for this sacrifice was amazing, and he's managed to complicate the position. Like I said, Richard is more known for this, but Wesley is one of the world's best players, and he can play every type of position. I'm liking White's attack now. That knight coming in, the other knight maybe coming around, and Richard has some tricky defending to do here.
Yeah, he certainly does, and he steps the queen to the other side of the board with the idea of shifting the queen along the 7th row for defensive purposes, and whoa, Richard's king doing an escape job there, running away.
And you can see the evaluation bar going up and down. That's because it's such a chaotic, crazy position. Humans will find this very hard to work out. They're both under a minute here in what is just a complete mess. What an exciting game to start up an alternate day. The queen moves its way in with a check. The king finds a safer square moving up. And now the rook is trying to wriggle. If the rook goes to the right, it will give the black king another check. 3 pieces attacking is often a very dangerous number, but Richard has a number of pieces defending. His king is not there on its own, but he's got to be so careful here with only 35 seconds to find the right defense. He looks nervous to me, Ivanka.
He's certainly nervous, but who wouldn't be nervous with their king exposed like that? No, I mean, here Richard is going to be in hyper-focus mode. He's going to be calculating all the checks, the captures, and all the threats. And 19 seconds, and the clock is ticking down. He introduces a new piece into the defense, allowing a check from Wesley. King Sky escapes down, but it feels like the knight can come in.
I think
maybe.
knight d7 is a killer move. What a brilliant knight d7 check is amazing idea. Is he going to play it? He does, and this is going to win the queen. After you play this move, the queen is going to be grabbed, but black has a lot of pieces for that queen, Ivanka.
He does have a lot of pieces, but look at the king. The king is still unsafe, and now all Richard has to do is all Wesley has to do is introduce all the pieces into attack. Now the rook in the corner needs to come into the game.
Materialistically, Richard is doing okay.
No,
he's blundered a piece with
check.
They're playing for 20,000 euros here. It's a massive amount of cash on one game of chess. It's got to be scary to be in that position. Richard's starting with a quiet opening here. He's basically saying, I want the action later on. I'm not going to engage with a more popular opening, even though this is called the Reti opening. It's reasonably popular. He just wants to get into the game here, Ivanka.
Yeah, he certainly does want to get into the game, but this is really very much Richard's trademark style. You know, he opens unconventionally, and the fight is really there in the middle game. And once again, Wesley starting with a very high heart rate of 130. He's in the red, and Wesley, he's playing the most committal moves, pushing that pawn forward 1 square in the middle. He's being greedy. He's grabbing space.
Wesley is a very traditional, principled player, so if he gets a chance to take the middle of the board, he will. And this is his conventional style against Richard's unconventional style, even though in the first game he did play quite unconventionally himself. And this position, well, black has a lovely hold in the center with the bishop there, but Richard's pieces are looking quite good. And watch out for those dark squares. Maybe Richard can move his knight to try and get the dark square bishop. He does, Ivanka.
Yeah, I mean, I was a bit surprised there by Wesley's last move. I mean, I like my bishops. I like to protect them. But Wesley thinking otherwise, that his space is worth. And now the queen comes into the middle, but that queen can get kicked around. And sure enough, there's Richard just with that pawn move opening up the bishop's diagonal.
So the pawn structure is in black's favor because that pawn that Richard just moved is what we call a backwards pawn. It's a weakness in white's position, but the pieces, as Ivanka mentioned, is certainly in White's favour. He can now move his bishop undeveloped into the game. If he gets into the end part of the game, the bishops could take control. And there you go, a good move, attacking the queen and also lining up against the pawn there. I'm really liking Richard's chances of levelling the match here.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there, and especially that light square bishop, which is like a sleeping assassin, is already targeting one pawn there on b7, and Wesley offering a trade of queens. I'm really not sure about that move because, first of all, this pawn drops, and I feel that any endgame is going to benefit Richard with that mighty bishop pair.
The bishops are really very strong in this position, and it's equal on materials, and Richard's also got rid of that weak pawn that he had, so now the pawn structure is not a problem for him. So what he's got to do is just start using those bishops. He might want to grab another pawn here. I think he's thinking about that. The bishop in front of White's king can do a zoomy and zoom down and grab a pawn on the left hand side, but he also might want to exchange queens or even just move his queen out of the way here.
I also was just thinking, just make a nice little pawn chain there on the left side of the board. And well, Richard's an active player. He decides to mobilize his rook. Also, fantastic way to play.
This move is aiming at the pawn in front of Black's rook on e7 there, and Richard really wants to take that pawn. The evaluation bar did not like that move as much as some of the other options, but this is blitz chess. It's very hard to play perfect moves when you've got no time on the clock. And Wesley grabbing a pawn here, and Richard also taking one. And I still like the bishops here personally. Maybe, okay, Black can get some counterplay, and he does. He moves his knight into the middle, Jovanka, trying to create some counterplay, attacking the bishop.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm not particularly keen on with Richard's last few moves is that if the queens now get traded off, well, the pawn structure is very symmetrical. I would prefer to have that in balance so that the bishops could rule supreme. But still, the endgame is quite a way away, and you can see that if the dark square bishop and the queen were to coordinate on the same diagonal, that black king is gonna feel very scared. But at the minute, that is a pipe dream.
Yes, the one thing is just like White's pieces are not quite coordinating as well as they'd like, are they, Jovanka?
No.
I mean, the bishop is a bit disconnected in Black's half of the board. Black's pieces at the moment have better coordination, so there are some problems that Richard needs to overcome. Both these players do generally have high heart rates. I mean, I think they use that to their advantage to get into the zone when they're playing, but there's a bit of an issue here. What do? Your bishop is threatened. Do you attack the queen? Do you move your bishop away?
Yeah.
Do you capture that knight? There's a lot of things to think about. 35 seconds, Jovanka.
No, I know, not very much time, and I must admit, something that would appeal to me, although it's very, very risky, is to actually capture the knight in the middle of the board. And well, Richard likes to play with his pieces. He doesn't care about material. Instead, he uses his rook that was sleeping in the aid of this bishop. But yeah, I was really tempted to go bishop takes knight and then get control of all the dark squares.
He might be trying to do that here, but he has given up a pawn, Richard. But to get that rook to where it's supposed to be best placed on the 7th rank, it was an old player, Nimzovich, who said in one of his old books, "My system, this is where you need to have your rooks." Famous German player there. I don't think he was from Berlin, but I don't know. And now we see another tactical move there. Wow, knight takes pawn, and Richard moves his queen immediately into the middle. Maybe that's a mistake. He moved that very quickly. They're both so short a time, though. This could go either way. It's just too complicated, this position.
It's incredibly complicated. And now Wesley retreating the queen to attack the rook. And you can even see the bar there was completely confused. And, well, Wesley creating some magic there with the knight. Now it's attacking.
Knight takes rook was possible.
Yeah.
He could have taken the rook because of a fork on e2. Wesley missed the win in that position. He's still doing okay there, but he actually missed. He had a knight fork, and this is where the blunders start to occur when there's no time on the clock. Now Wesley is 2 pawns up, but those bishops are again, to my eyes, looking very, very dangerous. I think Richard has full compensation here.
He certainly does have full compensation, and Richard being very sneaky there, maybe even thinking about sacrificing that rook for the bishop to get at the king, and the rook lift, and ooh, Richard's king is really shaky. Will it survive?
Well, Richard's king is walking up the board there without any fear, and it does look like that king could be in a lot of trouble. Black has 3 pieces attacking it, but it's a crazy position. Keep an eye on the clock there. Richard grabbing a pawn, and Wesley just trying to coordinate his pieces. And there, the rook lining up against White's king. The bishop is attacking that rook. It has to move. It's just, again, it could go any way, this position.
Absolutely. And, well, this is a nice move from Wesley. It's greedy, but at the same time, it's attacking the rook. It's a multi-purpose move. But look at those counter-attacking moves that Richard keeps on finding.
And it's going to be liquidated, this position, quite soon. And we see there, it is a killer fork by Wesley So. Wesley So taking the win.